Hey heroes, welcome to another uncanny episode of History of the Marvel Universe. This channel is sponsored in part by Patreon supporters. If you would like to vote in monthly polls that help decide what topics get covered on the channel, then you can sign up for $1 per month over at patreon.com/MaryMarvelite. The link is in the description below, along with other places you can find me. This week's tale begins with the newlywed couple of Norton and Edna McCoy. They moved into a new town built around a nuclear power plant where Norton made his living. He was convinced that the work was safe, but one day a short in the system prevented the carbon rods from lowering, threatening the lives of everyone at the plant. Norton volunteered to lower the rods manually, but was exposed to a dangerous amount of radiation in the process. Fortunately, he survived, and his wife convinced him to move and find a new job so they could continue building their life there together. And so it was in the peaceful farming town of Dunphy, Illinois that their son, Henry Philip McCoy, or Hank, was born. Now, as many of you are already aware, mutants in the Marvel Universe are people born with a special X-Gene. For those with an outward physical mutation, it is common for them to appear human until their powers manifest during puberty, at which point their body will begin to change. However, in Hank's case, likely due to his father's exposure to radiation, he was born with unusually large and dexterous hands and feet. From a young age, he displayed an aptitude for jumping and climbing, and as a boy, his exceptional grip strength sometimes proved difficult to control. And it wasn't just his physicality that was extraordinary, for Hank also had a keen and inquisitive mind. This sometimes resulted in frustration from the adults around him, like when he disassembled the school bus's engine block to see how it worked. This also annoyed his one-time girlfriend Mindy when he was preoccupied with deducing how everything worked during a carnival boat ride. Between all of this, Hank was often mocked by his fellow classmates who nicknamed him the Beast. However, one person to stand up for him was Jennifer Niles, a girl that Hank tutored in biology. When Hank was going to be alone during junior prom, Jennifer insisted on being his date. I will note that when you dig into handbooks and indexes, there are conflicting reports about whether Hank was with Jennifer or the previously mentioned Mindy when he first got involved with varsity football, but we don't need to dig too much into that kind of minutia here. In his classic origin and several retellings, while Hank didn't intend on joining the team, the coach insisted after witnessing his considerable strength. According to another source, the coach initially only let him on the team as a blocker, but Jennifer convinced him to give him a chance at being a quarterback. Contradictory flashbacks aside, the important thing is that the Beast did indeed become a star player. During one game, a trio of criminals attempted to evade the police by cutting across the field. Hank intervened and, with his powers, easily defeated the robbers. However, this caused him to be noticed by a supervillain called the Conquistador, who then abducted the McCoy family. By holding his parents hostage, the villain coerced Hank into stealing an experimental nuclear reactor for him. But this also caught the attention of Professor Charles Xavier, who was still in the process of assembling his X-Men. And so the first three recruits, Cyclops, Iceman, and Angel, were dispatched to help. Thanks to them, the Conquistador was defeated and Hank's parents were rescued. After that, Xavier extended an invitation for Hank to attend his new school for gifted youngsters, which he happily accepted. Thus, Hank McCoy became the fourth X-Man and reclaimed the moniker Beast as his codename. To protect his students' anonymity, Xavier used his own psychic powers to erase the memories of Hank's abilities from everyone who knew about them. But because she and Hank were so close, this caused Jennifer Niles to forget all of their time together. After Jean Grey completed the team, the 5 X-Men fought together against Magneto and other mutant and non-mutant menaces. It didn't take Hank long to become close friends with his younger teammate Bobby Drake. Iceman. It was Bobby's girlfriend at the time, Zelda, who helped introduce Hank to a librarian named Vera Cantor. Hank and Vera started dating, and the two couples often spent time together. At Xavier's school, Hank eventually completed his doctoral studies and graduated from the X-Men. He found employment as a genetic researcher at the Brand Corporation, working alongside a Dr. Carl Maddox. And he found a new romance in Carl's assistant, Linda Donaldson. While working there, Hank deduced the formula for a hormonal extract that catalyzed genetic mutation in humans. But before he could present his findings, Hank overheard Carl Maddox reporting to someone called Agent 9 and plotting to steal government secrets. In truth, he was in league with a subversive organization called the Secret Empire, whose members were each identified by a number denoting their rank. Hank wanted to stop Maddox and keep his own research out of the wrong hands, but feared that his secret identity would be discovered. Letting his ego determine his actions, he drank the hormonal extract he distilled, planning on reversing its effects inside of an hour. Hank's powers were enhanced, but his moniker became much more literal as he was transformed into a furry gray beast. And while he was able to thwart Maddox's plot, his sense of time had been thrown off by his transformation. Thus, he remained in this form for too long and was unable to restore himself to normal afterwards. For a time, he wore a latex mask and gloves to disguise himself as his own former appearance. His furry form also had a less human posture, and so he used tightened straps to force himself upright. As Hank McCoy, he continued working at the Brand Corporation while trying to ferret out enemy agents. As the Beast, he settled into his new form while his fur slowly shifted from gray to blue. Meanwhile, he continued to date Linda, who was unaware of his secret. However, he was also unaware of hers, for Linda Donaldson was Agent Number 9 of the Secret Empire. And so the Beast was soon one of several mutants to be captured by the subversive group. Fortunately, the abductees were rescued by Captain America and the Falcon, along with several X-Men. It was primarily Cap who defeated this particular incarnation of the Secret Empire and unmasked their number 1, revealing him to be a high-ranking government official, heavily implied to be the President of the United States. His identity was never revealed to the public, and the whole debacle was covered up after number 1 took his own life rather than be arrested. But back to the Beast, he was fired from his job at the Brand Corporation due to his continued absences. He slowly came to terms with his new appearance and abandoned his dual identity, eventually earning respect as an expert in mutation and evolutionary biology with his doctorate in genetics. He also continued his superheroics when he earned a place on the mighty Avengers. Together with them, he uncovered and helped defeat the corrupt leadership behind the Brand Corporation. His battles with Brand also involved Patsy Walker, who became the hero Hellcat, but I already covered all of that in my video about her, so I won't belabor the point here. As an Avenger, Beast befriended his teammate Wonder Man despite their differing personalities, or perhaps even because of them. The Beast had become lighthearted and outgoing, while Wonder Man was more quiet and contemplative. In any event, the friendship they forged would prove to be a lasting one. Hank also reunited with his former girlfriend Vera, and the two renewed their romance. He introduced her to his teammates, but she was then poisoned by an alien Skrull who was posing as the Avengers' butler, Edwin Jarvis. The Skrull, later identified as Jadak, offered to revive Vera only if the heroes brought him a powerful artifact, the Resurrection Stone. The heroes embarked on a journey through time to obtain the two broken halves of the stone, but Beast ultimately decided that it was too powerful to surrender and destroyed it. Vera was placed into suspended animation, keeping her alive until a cure could be found. Hank approached the likes of Mr. Fantastic and Dr. Strange for help, but it was ultimately Daimon Hellstrom, the son of Satan, who revived her. With the Avengers having recently reduced their numbers, the Beast started fighting alongside Strange's less formal group, the Defenders. He eventually reorganized several of those heroes into a more official team alongside other former X-Men, Iceman, and Angel. However, the three mutants were later the only Defenders remaining after a battle with the demonic Dragon of the Moon. Beast, Angel, and Iceman reunited with the other two original X-Men, Cyclops and Jean Grey, to found a new group, X-Factor. Initially, they used this company to pose as mutant hunters while secretly helping those they were sent to apprehend. For a while, Hank continued his on-again, off-again relationship with Vera, but they began to drift apart again after she started studying popular culture at Columbia and began exploring less conservative fashion choices. Not long after that, the Beast was abducted and experimented on by his former co-worker, Carl Maddox. Carl's son Artie also had a noticeable outward mutation which Carl wanted to reverse. However, he experimented on Hank using the resources of his new employer, Ryan Biochemical, without their knowledge or approval. After finding out what he was up to, Ryan's security was sent to storm his lab, and Carl Maddox sacrificed his own life, allowing X-Factor to escape with Artie and Beast. Furthermore, his experiments did indeed result in Hank returning to a more humanoid form while still retaining his original mutant powers. But then later, during a battle with Apocalypse, Hank was touched by his horseman, Pestilence. This caused him to be infected with a virus that reduced his intelligence but increased his strength every time he used his powers. The situation garnered sympathy from Trish Tilby, a television reporter who was investigating X-Factor. However, Hank felt betrayed when she talked about his condition on the air. Sometime later, Iceman was captured by Infectia, a mutant with the ability to transform people into her monstrous servants, the antibodies. Hank saved Bobby from Infectia's kiss, but it seems that her powers affected him differently than a normal human, and instead of becoming an antibody, recent changes to his genetic structure began to come undone. For a time, Hank was bedridden as he uncontrollably shifted between humanoid and bestial forms. In the end, he recovered, returning to his blue furry form and also regaining his full intellect. After that, he and Trish began to grow closer and started a relationship. Sometime later, Infectia hired the mutant Mesmero to mind control Vera Cantor as part of a plot to capture the Beast. This scheme ultimately failed, and this time Hank and Vera parted ways on good terms as friends. Vera got back to her normal life and presumably has lived peacefully since then, working as a school teacher. A less amiable reunion was the one with Jennifer Niles, his old girlfriend who no longer remembered him thanks to Xavier's mind wipe. By this point, she had become a leading genetics researcher, but was tricked into helping Commander Courage, a Belgian defense minister who plotted world domination using techno-organic technology to transform himself and others into something called wereborgs. In the end, Hank was able to reawaken Jennifer's memories of him, and the two worked together to thwart the commander's plans. Following a confrontation with the villainous Shadow King, the X-Factor members rejoined the X-Men proper. Now, with an abundance of members, the X-Men divided their forces into blue and gold squads, with Beast appropriately joining the former. A scientific genius, he quickly settled into his role as the team's medical and technological expert. As such, he performed in-depth study of the Legacy virus, a disease unleashed by Cable's evil clone, Strife, that initially targeted the mutant population specifically. Trish Tilby also investigated the virus and subsequently reported on live television that it had begun spreading from mutants to humans. In the ensuing hysteria, area, an innocent mutant was beaten to death by a lynch mob while trying to reach Xavier's school. Beast blamed Trish for this, and while she insisted that she was just reporting the facts as they were, the situation put an end to their relationship. Hank then spent long hours searching for a cure to the virus, rarely leaving his lab. Eventually, he found that someone had hacked his computer system and traced the source to the old, abandoned Brand Corporation facilities. Traveling there to investigate, he came face to face with an evil alternate version of himself. This Dark Beast came from a parallel timeline known as the Age of Apocalypse and imprisoned Hank within the walls of the Brand building. Dark Beast posed as our Hank for a time, but then allied itself with the psionic monster Onslaught. He also clashed with a government-sponsored X-Factor team who found and rescued the real McCoy. Having had time to reflect while being locked up for weeks, Hank later reconciled with Trish and the two got back together. During that time of growing anti-mutant sentiment, he often wore a holographic image inducer to appear human while in public. He returned to his study of the legacy virus, eventually succeeding in coming up with a cure, largely thanks to research conducted by Dr. Moira McTaggart. This cure could be spread as quickly as the virus itself, but doing so would be fatal to the first person to take it. Hank planned on finding a way around this problem, but the X-Man Colossus, who had already lost his sister to the virus, sacrificed his own life to release the cure. After that, Beast joined Storm on a mission to obtain a collection of diaries written by the mutant soothsayer Destiny. However, he was badly injured when the team encountered a deadly swordsman named Vargas. His life was ultimately saved by his teammate Sage, who used her mutant powers to increase Hank's, including the speed at which he healed. This also activated a secondary mutation, causing Hank to grow thicker and heavier, but also more felid in appearance. After that, Trish broke up with him over the phone, fearing the damage their relationship would have to her career. When Cyclops took over as headmaster of Xavier's school alongside Emma Frost, Beast remained as a member of both the faculty and the astonishing X-Men field team. When a scientist named Dr. Kavita Rao announced a supposed cure for genetic mutation, Hank went to confront her. She willingly gave him a sample, and Hank considered taking it for himself, leading to a conflict with his teammate Wolverine. But he soon discovered that the so-called mutant cure was a modified version of his own legacy virus cure that had been developed by experimenting on Colossus. As it turns out, Rao was working with an alien named Ord from the planet Breakworld, who abducted Colossus after his sacrifice and revived him. It was during the ensuing conflict with Ord that the X-Men first encountered Abigail Brand. A mutant herself, Brand was the half-alien director of SWORD, a government department designed to protect the Earth from extraterrestrial threats. She later abducted the X-Men, taking them with her on a mission to Breakworld itself, during which she found herself growing increasingly attracted towards Hank, in part due to his resemblance to her alien heritage. After that, she offered him a job, essentially recruiting him to hold her accountable for her actions in the line of duty. She also fully admitted that off the job she would be trying to seduce him. In the meantime, Beast had a number of disagreements with Cyclops over his decisions. For example, during the Skrull invasion of Earth, Hank created a modified version of the legacy virus targeting their alien biology. However, Cyclops released the virus on the Skrulls before confirming that Beast also had a cure. He also begrudged being asked to provide Cyclops with technology without being told that it would be used by a secret lethal X-Force squad. The final straw came when he was abducted and tortured by the Dark Beast during a conflict with Norman Osborn. Hank left the X-Men and joined SWORD, where he worked under his then-girlfriend Abigail Brand. He also maintained his Avengers ties and became a member of a covert Black Ops team started by Steve Rogers. When Wolverine also broke away from Cyclops to open the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning, Hank signed on as vice principal. During a subsequent conflict between the Avengers and the X-Men over whether or not to allow the Phoenix Force to return to Earth, Wolverine and Beast sided with the Avengers, who wanted to stop it. Following that crisis, Hank began to mutate yet again, but this time he wasn't sure if his body could handle the strain. Wanting to do something about an increasingly radicalized Cyclops before it was too late, he traveled back in time and recruited his own younger self and the other original X-Men while they were all still teenagers. When the older Beast was bedridden due to his condition, it was his younger, time-displaced self who helped save his life. When Hank's mutation finally stabilized, he was still blue and furry, but shifted to a more ape-like form. However, his abuse of the space-time continuum was deeply concerning to the other X-Men, who started to fear what he was capable of. The younger X-Men stayed in that era for some time, but eventually returned to the point at which they were taken. Their memories of the future were suppressed to preserve the timeline, but after they were sent back, their older selves gained the memories of their time-displaced adventures. Meanwhile, Hank would come to look back on some of his actions with regret. During a conflict between mutants and the Inhumans, Beast worked with the latter in an attempt to find a peaceful solution, but ultimately failed. After that, when Hydra overthrew the US government with a fascist Steve Rogers created by the Cosmic Cube as their figurehead, Beast acted as a diplomat between Hydra's America and the sovereign mutant land of Mutation. Mutation was dismantled after the fall of Hydra, but later Professor Xavier and Magneto worked together to establish a more legitimate mutant nation, Krakoa. In this era, the Beast was placed in charge of Krakoa's intelligence agency, X-Force. However, since then he has made a number of morally questionable decisions in the name of mutant kind. But we are out of time for this video, so if you want to know more about those events, you can check out the 2020 X-Force series for yourself. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it on your favorite social media. As always, the issues referenced in this video are listed in the description below if you would like to read them for yourself, as well as links to other places you can find me, including my Patreon page where for only $1 a month you can get your name in these special thanks here. So until next time, true believers, Excelsior!